there is no waste in nature. There is no need to have disposal of waste because it just doesn't happen. Like everything that dies in nature nourishes the next thing. But really, what if whenever we operated as a human being, as a family, as a neighborhood, as a business, we actually were a part of nature and we were really in tune with it, and we would often leave the places where we are more diverse, more beautiful.
This podcast is a product of Vive, where we unlock sustainable businesses. Produced by Amplitude Ventures, your partners in early stage venture building.
Hi, and welcome to Business as Unusual. So today we are super excited to have Nora Wilhelm joining our podcast. Welcome, Nora. It's so nice to have you joining.
Thank you, Sarah. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So I think you have a super interesting background. You are working within the intersection of social innovation, sustainability, as well as leadership. And you have built and co-founded organizations such as Collaboratio, Helvetica, The Well, and now you have built Parayma. And I'm very curious to hear more about these organizations that you've built, but also the background behind it. So, what first kind of drew you to system change?
When I had my kind of awakening to the state of the world, I would say, when I was 15 to 16 years old, it's like a bubble that I was in burst a bit. I had this, sense that the world was mostly good and that, people were mostly fair, etc. And then I kind of learned about a number of things that we humans do to each other, that we do to the animals that share this planet with us, that we do to the rest of nature, that just really shocked me. And from there, I think I was on a very committed path of making the best possible contribution that I can make to a better future. And so that led me to do all sorts of things. And I think I was just very, very motivated. And I would always do, whenever I saw an opportunity, whatever I could get my hands on, I would kind of go all in. And this led me to work with young people, with the Youth Red Cross in Geneva, which kind of the Red Cross kind of originated where I grew up. The UN was there as well. So I got interested in multilateralism and kind of these international institutions. I thought that's a big hope for me, right? That we managed to do better as humanity thanks to coordinating in this way. And so, yeah, I got very much into this trajectory. But after maybe 10 years of being very, very active, especially within something called the European Youth Parliament, so a network that helps young people kind of be engaged in, active citizenship and thinking about policy, thinking about the future and helping to shape it, I kind of realized that even if what I did was transformative, right? Like I definitely saw, to me, the impact was the lives that we transformed, right? Of these young people and the skills that we all got from this, the experiences, how that prepared us for maybe, being more active in democracy in the future. So I definitely saw an impact, but I had to kind of acknowledge that even if we were completely successful, it was still like a drop of water in a big bucket, right? Or like just a drop of water on a forest fire. And I began to think about, well, what is it that keeps recreating the same problems? How come so many of us care about sustainability, right? Study these topics, care about justice, care about equity, care about women's rights, etc. And still we keep advancing in the wrong direction, right? Still we keep emitting more, still we keep destroying our environment more, etc. And that's when I kind of began looking into systems thinking and systems change. Because once you start using these type of lenses and these types of models, for example, the iceberg model is a really good one. It invites you to think about what is below the waterline. I do have a free template on my website, which I'm happy to put in the show notes. So usually we tend to focus on what's above the waterline, right? Everyone knows the Titanic story. This iceberg doesn't look so big, and actually underneath the water, it's much bigger than expected as well, right? So we see issues. We see CO2 emissions go up. We see, for example, still a lack of women in leadership positions. I mean, I know Norway is doing a lot better than Switzerland is, my country, so it's a bit contextual, right? But in general, we're still lagging behind in terms of equality. And then many people will jump to what is immediate, right? To like, oh, well, that's the thing we need to fix. And so they will say things like, oh, there's a pay gap. We just need to teach women how to negotiate their salaries better. And the truth, which studies have shown, is that if you do negotiate like a man would, what happens is not that you get the salary that that you deserve, just that you get disliked, right? Anyway, so often we are at this level of something that in systems thinking we would call fighting the symptoms.
Yeah.
A very easy way to understand this is, for example, if there's plastic in the ocean and everyone is aware of that, right? And if we focus only on beach cleanups and removing the plastic from the ocean while still putting in more and more plastic, obviously we're not solving the problem, right?
Yeah.
So the iceberg model invites us to look one level deeper. What are the rules, processes, norms, traditions, right? The structures that shape this problem. So what causes, for example, plastic to end up in the ocean? Why is single-use plastic allowed in the first place? Why do we need to negotiate our salaries in the first place, right? Like, where does this whole misogyny come from in the first place? So we kind of look at the processes, the rules, right? Things like maternity leave, the absence of a paternity leave, all those things will impact, for example, gender equity in the workplace. And then one level below, we ask ourselves, who is deciding those rules? Who is making those policies? Who is making these decisions or has made them in the past and is trying really hard for them not to be changed? And then usually we will find interest groups, right? Like lobbies, right-wing politicians that don't want change or progress, etc. And then at the deepest level, we can ask ourselves, what is the worldview of these people for them to think that this way of operating is justified, right? And so,
Yeah.
for example, to only have a maternity leave, a short one, and no paternity leave, like you kind of have to believe that women are here to be actually at home and to be mothers, right? That has to be part of your values, because otherwise, why would you do that? To allow plastic to end up in the ocean, you kind of have to believe that profit is more important than the planet and people, and that it's not your fault, it's not your responsibility, and that who cares about nature anyway, right? You have to feel very detached from nature to allow for this to unfold.
Exactly.
So that to give like a bit of an example of how we start to think when we get into this systems thinking.
Yeah.
And so I'm still interested in lives transformed. I'm still interested, right, in what happens when you and I have this conversation, when people have an exchange. Like I think that level of impact is crucial, right? Because that's what everything else builds on. And I'm very interested now and have been for the last 8 years or so in how do we shift the conditions that keep the issue in place.
Wow, that's it's really interesting and such an important topic to address. And I think like the life that we live today has become so fast-paced that people don't even stop to question. We just kind of live how we're used to living, how we're brought up, how society tells us to what is normal. But I think as soon as you sit down and you just start reflecting on this, like for example, using the iceberg model, as you mentioned, you kind of you stop and you think like, how do we even allow this to continue happening? And I think it's also interesting. I think you could kind of go on forever with this model because, like in your example with, you know, this person would have to think that profit is more important than nature, and like what would be the reason for that? You know, because
Yeah.
like you say, detaching from nature and like um maybe I think just how we're kind of living today with materialism and consumerism is kind of like trying to cover up and fill a hole that's not ever going to be filled by consumerism. It's going to be filled by actually reconnecting with nature and with kind of self-development and figuring out and working with oneself. And I think those are so interesting topics as well, with like going deeper into I how organization starts with people and individuals, and how do we need to kind of change ourselves in order to help contribute to a better world. um, but I think that is in the introduction I mentioned some of the organizations that you have co-founded and built, and I think um, if I understood it correctly, those are also areas where people um, that are wanting to make change and contribute in the system change can have a network or a community to develop and to kind of discover. Do you want to kind of elaborate a bit
Sure.
on these organizations and what you do?
Yeah, happy to. So yeah, that led me to kind of do a lot of systems change work, at first focused on Switzerland, because I think a place-based approach is also really powerful to say, I'm taking my own country to task, right? I'm like taking responsibility in a way for where I live, and also the privilege, that relative privilege, if I look at on a global level. Um, and I did a lot of work on that, worked with, stakeholders from all sectors. We ran social innovation labs. We helped big networks, for example, in sustainable business, deliver very impactful conferences, etc. So we did a vast array of things, trained hundreds of people in this work here. And then a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I got the opportunity to kind of scale in a way my focus, or like who I can support, to a more
Mm.
global level. So with Parayma, I'm now able to, for example, write the books that I didn't have time to write before because I was just running from one project to the next and had a burnout in the middle. I'm sure we'll talk about that later on. But yeah, that time was very, very intense and
Mm.
a lot of lessons learned. And Paraima is kind of my opportunity, really, which I'm so grateful for, to put all those hard learned lessons out into the world and at the service of this movement of people who
Mm.
either want to be systems change leaders or already are. And so there, what I did so far is that I developed an online program called the Changework Compass, which helps people find what I call their unique contribution. So I'm just a deep believer in that we all are
Mm.
here for a reason, and we all have, a contribution to make. Some people would call that a purpose or a calling. And in this context of the transition that we're in towards a more just and regenerative future, I really think that we are a team, and that it's kind of the work of each of us to find where in the team they should be positioned, right? Like if we think of it literally like a playing field, so that we can pass the ball to each other, so that we have more chances of actually scoring the goal. I'm not a sports person at all, but like allow me this one metaphor. Um, so that's kind of my ambition or my hope with this particular program, is to help more people really step into their power and stop
Mm.
playing small and stop trying to follow these career paths and these stories. Like you said, they're not even valid anymore, right? We were told happiness is at the end of the consumerist road. And when you
Mm.
have this many houses and this many cars, you will be happy. And the truth is, it's not correct, right? It's not like that. We know science shows very clearly that
Yeah.
happiness is actually coming from good relationships. And after a certain level of income, it stagnates, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't increase anymore. And it's the quality of our presence and of our community, etc., right? That's, and how alive we feel, that makes our
Um,
happiness. And so that's kind of story or narrative that we were taught has anyway broken down, right? We can see it in real time. So what other stories are there that could inspire us? What does it really mean to be a human being? And indeed, right, like we were all socialized in a way that was profoundly disconnecting us from nature, from other people, right? We were told that, well, you're on your own, you have to be very individualistic. Like community kind of was actively broken down because you can
mm.
make more money from people who need to privatize, right, everything. If I need a private solution for my childcare because I don't have neighbors and family who will help, that's good for the GDP, right?
Mm.
Like destroying the environment, very good for the GDP.
Yeah.
People who are unhappy with themselves and who don't even know who they really are, very good for if you want to have good consumers. So we're
Yeah.
kind of trying to challenge all of these narratives and say, well, what if you really got in touch with who you are? What's really important to you? What's kind of
Mm.
on your heart that you really want to contribute? And also the gifts that you have, right? Because you may
Um,
have such brilliant skills and experiences that would really make a difference if you were just bold enough to wield them in a context where it's really needed.
yeah.
So that's kind of the part of the work at Parayma. So helping people figure out their position in the field, their unique contribution, and then once they're ready, deepen towards systems change. So I'm not saying everyone has to go out there and like change systems, right? It's not for everyone. If you
Mm.
are like, excellent in, I don't know, being a teacher, that's amazing. That's a great contribution, right?
Yeah.
We need people everywhere. But some people feel a call to like figure out which laws can we change, right? How do we shift this paradigm? And so those people I support more specifically because they are also, uh, in general, receiving less support on a global scale. There's a lot of support if you want to do a startup, in something. There's quite some support if you want to join a certain career. But if you want to do systems change work, because it's such a new field that is little understood, there is not a lot of support and not a lot of funding as well. And so
Yeah.
that's really why I was like, okay, here I want to make a difference. I want to contribute. That's part of my unique contribution for now.
Yeah.
And hoping that together we can strengthen this movement so that less of us also burn out and abandon that trajectory.
Yeah.
So that's for Parayma. And the well is almost like the calm ocean counterpart to that. So the well came from my own experience with burning out, and because we care so much, right? Many of us who are on these tracks tend to burn out because we care just so deeply. We burn literally very brightly for what we do, and then may struggle in all of our care for the world, for the people. We may struggle to take care also of ourselves. And that may even feel like egoistic, right? Like, oh, I cannot rest. I have to keep going, or other people have it so much worse. And so slowly, we kind of burn through our reserves until we are completely in a burnout. And in the face of that, I really wanted to be transparent about it, because I also feel like as a person who's a little bit, in the public, and people see maybe an award I win or a success I have, I really wanted to also be honest about my challenges, right? I wanted to be like, look, currently this is the price I'm paying for that success that you're seeing, or behind the scenes, here's how it looks. Or here's how it actually feels, right? Here's what I'm working on. Here's what I haven't figured out. So that's part of my kind of intention, just to be very honest, because I know many people go through this actually. And when we only ever see each other's highlight reels, we feel
Yeah.
like we're behind, right? Oh, everyone's doing so well, and why am I struggling? And I discovered through being in the burnout clinic, also through remembering what I loved to do as a child, the power of art-based practices. So, for example, studies also show that dancing alone has a higher positive effect on your mental health if you're depressed than just taking antidepressants.
Yeah.
So the
Wow.
endorphins, right? If you just like dance a little, like you already feel better. But the same goes for example, if you're painting, if you are writing, if you're working with clay, something that you're just doing for the process, it can be
Yeah.
incredibly meditative, right? Like, for example, making a mandala, right? And we're not doing it to be great painters or a sculptor. We're just doing it for the process to be with ourselves, because I think a large part of what we need to relearn is to be with ourselves, right? To be present and actually feel what's there, and then see what insights come from that process. So that's the well. It's like my little hobby, my little side quest to kind of replenish our own inner creative wells.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And it's like it kind of also illustrates, like you say, the balance. Yeah, making sure to have room to do other things that are not to reach a goal or to check a list or to kind of
Hmm.
today I have done this. Like you kind of just existed and I don't know, been present, and I really like that.
Yeah. And it also really reconnects us with our power.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what depression will tell you is like, if we imagine depression like whispering in your ear, or burnout is like nothing ever can ever change, right? This is how
Mm.
it will be forever. Things will be this bad forever, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
part of like what the experience is. And also if what we're told by like big oil lobbies and right, all of these like influenced media is like, we are headed straight for disaster and there's nothing we can do. And like keeping us disempowered is a very strategic thing to do, because a disempowered person, a person who feels no agency, who feels like there's nothing I can do, indeed will not try to do anything.
Yeah.
So I find that when we feel that, right, when we feel powerless, when we feel like, oh, there's nothing I can do, sometimes,
Mhm.
well, being in contact and community with other change workers, we're like, of course, there's so much you can do. That helps, right? And
Yeah.
the things that we do at the well, like just, for example, sculpt, like working with a piece of clay. And before there was a blob of clay, and now there is something, whatever it is, right? And you created that. Like that reminds you that things don't have to always stay the same. Things don't always have
Yeah.
to stay this bad. You can literally form your reality just as you could form this clay. You can make a
Mm.
difference. You can make a change. And remembering that and reconnecting to our power is just such an essential step, whether it
Yeah.
is as an artist, quote unquote, or someone who wants to bring change into the world.
Mm. Definitely. And I was also I had a question when you kind of when you went through what you're doing in uh Parayama, Parayma. Uh, and that is because I think there are, like you mentioned, there are people that are very like certain of their purpose or their drive, and like they know they have a vision, or for some people they have a very they're driven by a specific hobby or something that gives them a lot of joy. A lot of people do have these things in their life, but some people don't. And I think like when you I'm just curious, what are your thoughts in terms of people that might be in a like life situation and in a job where it's like, yeah, but I'm kind of just I'm working to just have a salary to be able to just live life, and I live for the weekends to kind of just, maybe travel a bit or go to a concert or whatever, but that don't really see that they have a drive or a purpose for anything. Do you have any like experience or recommendations, like how would you go about discovering or seeing what might be underneath?
Mhm. So for the most case, people that I work with are people who look at the state of the world and they feel very
Mm.
alarmed, right? They feel concerned, they care. So that's like the baseline, right? There's a sense
Yeah.
of caring. And then there's almost like two possibilities. Either you step in and you say, wow, this is bad. We're on the wrong trajectory. I care. What can I do? Or
Mm.
you say, wow, this is bad, wrong trajectory. I don't think I can do anything, or I don't even know where to begin, right? And so, in both of those cases, the Change Work Compass will help. And we do have a free workshop, by the way, called Find Your Purpose 101. So, we can also link that for anyone curious to check out the methodology.
Yeah.
But like reconnecting, for example, we do a lot of self awareness work. Like, who am I really? What are my values? And then we do visioning work. What kind of future would I want to see, right? Because it's not enough to just say this trajectory is bad, but hopefully we have stories of how the future will be more beautiful and more regenerative and more wonderful, and people will be happier, right? So we need
Mm.
to tune into that as well. And then from there, like the process will help both of those people get out of potential paralysis or questioning and have clarity on where they are best kind of
Mm.
suited to contribute. Now,
Mm.
the people who look at the world and don't feel any concern, or maybe they're, in that case, I would say probably they're not really looking, right? So
Yeah.
probably they're distracting themselves with, Netflix or scrolling or whatever, some type of consumption. So they're not in touch with reality, actually, with the way that it is. And there can be different reasons for that. Like, one is like, okay, well, maybe few people are just narcissists and don't care about anyone else and just care about themselves. And right, that's like a personality disorder. But that's
Mm.
the small minority. Many people, like, just were taught and conditioned so deeply into believing that this is normal, that they are like unable to see that it's problematic, right? It's like the fish in the water. If your whole life you were always like socialized in a way that, yeah, like, of course, like, cutting down all the trees is not a problem, it's just normal. And oh, many people are poor. Yeah, that's their own fault, not at all our fault, whatever, right? Like, just these stories that were like taught to you over so many years in so many different ways, reinforced constantly, that to overcome that and to actually see, for example, people suffering and feel touched by that, like, that's a big hurdle to overcome. All of these years of conditioning that teaches us that this has nothing to do with you.
Mm.
So in those cases, I do have empathy, because I think if you're disconnected to this extent from nature, from other people, you probably are disconnected from yourself also. And
Yeah.
you're probably not a very happy person. Like, you probably don't feel very empowered. Like, even people who then tend to be, racist or very like against other groups of people, often there's a profound suffering, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not excusing the behavior, I'm not condoning it, but like, I can relate to the sense or just this feeling that there's a lot of suffering there, and there's fear there, and there's a
Mm.
sense of I'm powerless, or like, I couldn't have this, so you shouldn't have it, right? So yeah. So if anyone, I mean, I don't think your listeners are probably not in this bucket. But in case anyone happens to be and feels a little bit called out on this, I would just begin the journey of reconnection. What
Mm.
does that look like? And this will be hard, right? Because if you reconnect with yourselves after years of denying, for example, who you really are, right? Whatever that may look like for you, that's hard. So,
Mm.
what would a beginning of the recovery journey look like? Like if tomorrow you were 1% more yourself, what would that look like? And
Mm.
that may require sitting, like, I don't know, in a mountain hut away from civilization for a while to figure it out. But maybe tomorrow you wear a color that you would never have dared wear before. Or like
Yeah.
even just like a more colorful sock if you're not, you know, there yet to wear I don't know, a different pullover of that color, right? So like what are tiny, tiny steps where you can begin to rebel against like this constricted cage really that you found yourself in and
Yeah.
begin to like express yourself more, be more true to who you are. And can you find ways to just contribute? And sometimes it doesn't have to be the best thing we could possibly do. Sometimes it's great to just volunteer at the soup kitchen, volunteer to teach the local language to people who come as refugees, just volunteer to do something. And I think
Mm.
feeling like how it restores our humanity when we are there for each other
Yeah.
can be really healing in and of itself. And then the journey may continue from there.
Yeah, those are very good reflections and tips and yeah. Uh Moving on to another topic that that I wanted to touch upon and that you briefly mentioned before. So I think as you mentioned a lot of change makers or people that are um working with and trying to create change in big established systems that might be like political, but it could also be organizations and I think a lot of times that also um is relevant for people working with sustainability in corporations. Is that, as you mentioned, you have a big passion and drive for what you're working with, and you want to achieve change that is really difficult to achieve, and a lot of people end up burning out, which is also a topic that is close to your heart. So, do you want to tell a bit about that, your experience, and also some of your reflections and tips for people or change makers out there?
hmm Yeah, burnout is such a tricky topic. And it always has like a little bit of different flavor depending on the context. Like in my networks, many people burn out because they're under-resourced. So for
Mm.
example, they're underfunded. They're asked to be activists to do everything for free,
Yeah.
while people who are willing to sell literally any type of garbage online can make millions, right? So
Mm.
you're like in this tension of like trying to do the right thing and being so under-resourced, or funding is lacking in general. So that's a big issue that you're always trying to do so much with so little.
Mm.
Um, and it feels like you're kind of a little bit of a Sisyphus, like, right, like pushing your boulder up the mountain, but the burden is just so big and the task is so big.
Mm.
And what I think many contexts have in common is that often we feel alone. We feel like this rests on my shoulders, right? Like I am alone here. I'm the one who has to carry this. Nobody else around me cares the way I do. So we feel so alone, so isolated. Um, and their community can be a great antidote, like finding
Mhm.
other people with a similar level of passion and care as you do, maybe in a similar role, so you can exchange about the specific challenges. And for example, when you're working within a business or a large organization in these type of like corporate social responsibility roles, that's its own level of challenges as well, right? You might not be under-resourced, probably you're paid fairly well compared to, say, an activist, but you are operating within a framework that in most cases, everything that you stand for and what you're trying to advance, like the whole system of the organization pushes against. And these I find to be some of the worst situations to be in when, on paper, your organization has a commitment to a net zero path, for example, or to this many like percentage of women or BIPOC, etc., in leadership positions, whatever the context kind of is. And you're like, great, like that's my role. I'm working towards making this happen. And then at every step of the way, they will be putting like sticks in your wheels, right? Like they will be, oh no, but this we can't do. Oh, this we don't have the budget. Oh no, this would like harm our bottom line, right? Like whatever the case may be, because very often, unfortunately, these commitments are just marketing. They're not a real true intention. And as long as, or let's put it this way, they, in some cases, they might not be only marketing, but they are always conditional on not harming the profit, on not harming the bottom
Yeah.
line. And this like super pervasive like logic of growth and growth and growth is just such a root cause of the problems that we are facing. If anyone
Yeah.
like degrowth is just a subject I really recommend exploring. It's really going to be challenging at first, but it's very, very interesting and actually gives hope as well, as a little sidebar. But so to be in that logic of growth, like a whole system, a whole business dominated by this logic of growth, of profit, that is the explicit goal and focus. And then to be trying to push against that, literally, because that's often what you have to do, that is so exhausting. And I mean, we've seen it recently, right? Like with now Trump coming to power, so many companies are just like, never mind, like quietly deleting all their climate pledges, their diversity pledges, all of it, like just whoops, never happened, right? Or Google is like, actually, I think we can use AI for war and for weapons. That's fine, right? Like just like suddenly changing their tune. And I can imagine for the people who, for example, spend their lifetime working for AI safety and AI not to be used in war, suddenly their employer is like, never mind, or right, the people who work towards a net zero future, etc. Like that is so disheartening.
Yeah.
So if you are the kind of person who's working within such a big organization where indeed there is this kind of, in German we say Gegenwind, like the wind is against you, like you're trying to sail this way and the wind is coming that way and you're like, like, yeah, that is super understandable why that would be a really, really hard thing to do. And I can't even like, speak specifically advice or anything like that. But in general, what my observation has been is that when we do have community, when we have people around you, around us, when we have things that keep us sane and clear and focused, and when we are more resourced in the sense that like we are grounded, we do things to take care of our own bodies, our own minds, our energies, we are in general much better able to like face that weather, right? That storm. So taking care of ourselves in this context, especially, but really in any context of change work, I had to learn is not optional. It's actually part of what we must put on our priority list if we want to keep doing this work over time. Because like transforming an organization is not a sprint, right? It's not something you can do once. It's like you show up day after day after day doing your best, having as many allies as possible. And for that, you need to be resourced. So when we think about burnout, that's, I think, the essential thing that I would say. And one thing that I keep repeating because it just blew my mind when I was in the burnout clinic is that they taught us that the burnout spiral begins with overwhelm. So something is too much. There's too big a burden. But the second step is denial. So the second step sounds like, it's fine, I can handle it, or I don't need help. Or in my case, it sounded like, oh yeah, it's a lot right now, but in 2 months it will be better. And it was never better. And then once you're in denial, right, then you begin seeing your friends less and sleeping less and eating less and, right, dropping your hobbies, dropping your movement, etc. And that's when at some point you end up in a place where your body just is like, no more, I can't do this.
Down. Yeah. It is, it's so scary. And also just seeing the numbers of increase just in general, like increase of people burning out. It's a very important topic to understand. I think it's also very misunderstood in our society today as well. And also, like you say, go to the root cause, not continue to kind of try to manage the symptoms, but what is the root cause of this? But to try to address a kind of a more positive note, in terms of the work that you do, and that in your experience, you have a lot of focus on regeneration, which is something that obviously is relevant for for a person, an individual, but also for a system or organization. And a lot of our listeners are working in the corporates, and I think regeneration is a very interesting topic that also I think more and more people are starting to understand, and I think it's often mistaken for, like, when we talk about sustainability, what we're really talking about is regeneration. And how do you guys work with that? And do you have any thoughts to share on regeneration and how that plays a role in changemakers' lives?
hmm So to me, regeneration is really like one paradigm in a way beyond what we call traditional, maybe sustainability. So if I
Mm,
imagine like where we've come from, right, with like complete extraction and destruction, and then at some point we're like, okay, let's maybe limit the destruction a little bit, and then we're like, okay, let's do green growth, which is another fun myth
yeah.
that studies show doesn't actually exist, and then. Okay, let's do sustainability. So we want sustainability to me means that we want the thing that we do to be able to be sustained, right? So we can destroy, but only at the pace that the thing can actually kind of come back, right? Like we can cut off the forest, but then we wait until it's grown back or whatever, etc. To take a very simple example, right? Or we reduce our CO2 footprint and so on. And to me, regeneration is a shift in paradigm. And I really love the concept because it builds a lot on nature. Like there's a lot of biomimicry in it. It's like, well,
Mhm.
how does nature work? And like there is no waste in nature. There is no need to like have right disposal of waste because it just doesn't happen. Like everything that dies in nature nourishes the next thing.
Yeah.
And so for that, like that mindset, I mean, circular economy is like an attempt, right, to move in that
Mhm.
direction. But really, what if whenever we operated as a human being, as a family, as a neighborhood, as a business, we actually were a part of nature and we were really in tune with it, and we would often leave the places where we are more diverse, more beautiful, right? So like completely shifting our mindset from humans just destroying things all the time and basically making our own world not hospitable to us, right, for our own survival, but actually co-creators and be able to like regenerate the places that we may have previously destroyed as well through the way that we work and are. And to me, I draw a lot of inspiration from different indigenous cultures, some of which are well preserved to this day. And there is this one person, Dr. June, she speaks to, she's from a Northern American indigenous population, and she has this wonderful TEDx talk. I really recommend it. And there's this quote in it where she says, like, what if we had a right to be here? What if, like, with our hands and our hearts, we like actually crafted the world, right, in these beautiful ways? And she speaks of her ancestors who like co-shaped nature, but did it in a way that was right harmonious,
Mm,
regenerative, that increased biodiversity in many cases.
mm.
So to me, this is such an inspiring picture, and I know it challenges most business models, right? It challenges most ways that we do things, and one
Yeah.
huge thing that it challenges is belonging.
Yeah.
It's asking us, do we really belong? Because if I belong to the forest that's next to my house, I don't want to see it destroyed, right? But if I'm disconnected and if I'm sold into a paradigm of convenience, if you tell me, yeah, we'll just, raise this over and then you'll have, I don't know, firewood and you never have to worry about heat again. I'm like, great,
Yeah.
right? So regeneration to me is asking us, do we really belong and where do we belong? And especially for people from, I would say, Europe, but also the US, like these kind of cultures where we have been so far removed from nature, right? Some
Mm.
more, some less. Like recultivating belonging is a long
Yeah.
road because I don't know if you heard about this one. Also, I don't know if it's a study or an experiment where they show like different trees. And it's like, how many different trees can you name? Native
Yeah.
trees to your area? And
Yeah.
it's like
None.
barely any, like maybe
Yeah.
one or two. And then they show you brands, and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, this, and brands we can name like hundreds, no
Yeah.
problem, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, wow, like this convenience and consumerism pushed us so far away from belonging and from like
Mm.
understanding our surroundings. So
Yeah.
beginning to recultivate that is such a huge step. And I
Yeah.
believe there are ways to, right, like run communities, run cities, run even businesses that can be regenerative,
Mm.
but it's going to look very different. Like if
Yeah.
you're ever curious about like exploring permaculture, for example, which is a way to do agriculture, so produce food and herbs, etc., but it's very like working with nature. And
Mm.
it's not considered viable at scale because it requires individualized approaches and it requires many, many people versus like the big machines and the monocrops, which we know are destroying, right, our soils, etc.
Mm.
These are considered viable under the current paradigm.
Yeah.
But which one is going to get us where we want to go? So I think
Yeah.
it's about relearning this permaculture, this regenerative approach to being human, really. And in doing
Mm.
so, I do believe that we also heal ourselves because it requires us to slow down. It requires us to like put down the phone and spend time in nature, right? It requires
Mm.
us to think about like, well, if I would cultivate my own food, like I have to like work for these many months until I get
Mm.
these 20 tomatoes, you know? So like it just like challenges so many of our thinking processes and it
Yeah.
re-anchors us back to the here and now. So
Yeah.
I'm very fascinated by the concept. I wouldn't say I'm, an expert or I've figured it all out. It's something I'm continuously learning and a
Mm.
path I'm walking. But I can really recommend, for example, Lara Storm has a course on regenerative leadership. That could be
Yeah.
interesting for some of the listeners as well.
Yeah. That's great. But I'm also curious, like, how would you, in your experience and your kind of perspective, balance then, like, living in kind of balance with nature? Like, obviously, we can look back and at our ancestors and see how they were able to live in balance, but obviously, we have evolved, like, technologically and population-wise, and how do you see balancing these things? Because I think a lot of regeneration is about kind of going back, but it can also be going forward and using technology in new ways to
Hmm.
kind of enforce or like to enable regeneration in new ways. So just a quick um reflection on the balancing between those two.
As long as we live under broken systems, it's pretty much impossible to be like perfectly aligned with all of our values, right? So like currently there is no computer that you can buy that no one has died or suffered for, right? We
Mm.
just know. Maybe you've seen this footage of in the Congo recently, like a mine collapsing, right? And 70 people, I think, passed away or were
Mm.
buried. Terrible, terrible things. And this is just a reality, right? That right now all of our electronics are like involved in this modern human slavery and in this destruction. This is just kind of a fact. And there is so far no company, huge business opportunity, by the way, if anyone is listening with that kind of spirit, like why isn't there an alternative, right? Why isn't there a computer that like there's the Fairphone where they really do their best to like, right, have a really fair and repairable, etc. device as a phone.
Mm.
But for laptops, we don't have that yet. So anyway, so unless you choose to like abstain very hard, I think we always have to make some type of trade-off in
Yeah.
many, many cases. So for me, I buy my tech secondhand, which, is not perfect, but it's maybe better than just buying new. And then it's
Mm.
just in general about asking ourselves, like, what is the path that I can walk that comes really easy to me? Like for me, it was very easy to become a vegetarian because even as a child, when I saw that it had been an animal, like if I could
Yeah.
tell, like a whole leg, there was a bone, I was like, oh, why? Like, I don't want to eat this. Like, why would I eat this? It kind of seemed crazy to me. So it was very easy for me to become vegetarian. For other people, becoming vegetarian is very hard. For
Mm.
me, what was very hard was stopping to buy clothes, like fast fashion clothes,
Mm.
because I had very low self-esteem. I bought into this whole, like narrative that you just buy the next thing and then you'll be pretty enough.
Mm.
And so I was like kind of addicted, right, to buying new stuff to feel maybe I will be more beautiful, I will be more, right? And so stopping that pattern was very hard for me. But I'm glad I was, able to. So it's all like an individual journey of where we need to ask ourselves, where can I stride ahead? Because this just comes so easy. And maybe I can even inspire the people around me, right? Like I can cook vegan meals for my whole, community, etc. Like I can bake amazing vegan things and inspire people. And in other cases, I will look to someone else who, for example, the fast fashion thing, they completely figured this out, and I will learn from them and I will be inspired by them because that comes easy to them. So to me, it's it's like a balance of accepting that we live in broken systems. We do. And unless you want to just live off berries in a little stream in the forest, probably there will be trade-offs. But then kind of ask ourselves, like, what is the choice here that is in alignment with my values? And can I make that choice? And what would that look like? And I find that often people feel like the journey of living more sustainably or regeneratively is one of giving things up. And it may look like it at first. It's like, oh, maybe I don't buy, these 50 pieces of clothing a year anymore. I'm giving up something. But actually, in truth, like if I really go this path, what am I gaining? Right? And very often, for example, if I say, you know what, I'm not going to like fly my whole family out for super short vacations anymore. I'm going to start to discover our own country and do these amazing like excursions into nature. What do you actually gain? And very often going back to like the false narratives that we were told, right, around what will make us happy, what will make us feel good about ourselves, etc. Those were false narratives. And in truth, often like opting out of those narratives and into something that is more community-based, more relational, more regenerative, actually makes us gain so much happiness, so much belonging, so much joy, so many new relationships. And so I'm not saying it's always easy, but it's a path that I also want to speak to, that it's worth walking because it will make you a happier person, literally.
It's such a good point. And I think it's interesting reflection, like most people, what they really want in life is to be happy. And yet we're kind of living in a lifestyle that is not making happy people. So we need to change how we live. I think it has been such a interesting chat with you, Nora, and thank you for sharing all of your insight and experience. It has been so inspiring and also motivating and insightful. I just want to end with one last question. You have been giving some good references to like both your own material that you have on your websites, as well as some video clips and books and school of thoughts that you have been referring to. But if you could just quickly summarize some of the kind of recommendations you would give for someone, it might be like a change worker who want to kind of explore either it be regeneration or just how to live and cope in this world. What would that be?
So one set of books that really, really influenced me is the Theory U books. So literally written U. And especially for people also working potentially in an organization or in corporates, it's a whole methodology of transformation that will speak also to your context. So it will speak to the larger societal context, it will speak to the inner work, but it will also give examples and tools and language for how transformation can happen in an organizational or corporate setting. So Theory U for me was very influential. Then anything by Vandana Shiva, especially when it's about regeneration, very, very powerful texts and work. I mentioned Laura Storm, who did work on regenerative leadership. There's a book as well that she co-authored on this.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about Who Do We Choose to Be by Margaret Wheatley. Very powerful book that asks us, who do we choose to be in this day and age? I'm writing the book version of the Change Work Compass, so how to like find your place, your contribution in this whole process.
Wow.
But yeah, these are, I think, some of the essential books. And otherwise, what's really inspired me is, in addition to nonfiction books, is to read different fantasy books. And to read fantasy books that are, for example, set in the future. Like one I can mention is A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. Excellent book. It's like post-awakening of the robots in our society. And it follows this monk of a new religion that we don't have, as they meet the first robot that leaves the forest. And you just discover this future. And for example, they have one device that they keep for their whole life. When they come of age, you get your phone, your device, and then you just keep repairing it and you never need to get another phone because it will
Yeah.
always work. Just as an example, right? But it's a way to be immersed in that type of future, which I think really helps as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, you know, I think it's maybe the especially interested that are actually reading the kind of nonfiction books about these topics, even though I think more and more people should be diving into this. But I've seen just kind of people that are reading these fiction books that are based in the future and how we are the path that we're heading towards and how that is actually making them be like, okay, this is serious and we need to
Hmm.
like how are we living today? What are we doing with our planet? So yeah, it's I'm definitely gonna look up the books that you recommended.
Great.
Great. Thank you so much, Nora. It has been lovely having you on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to following your path forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation, and it always gives me hope, right? To remind ourselves that we are so many. We may not know each other, many of us will never meet, but we are a
Yeah.
movement millions of people strong and
Yeah.
centuries in the making, right? Like we're also standing in the shoulders of giants, and many of us are having these questions and are trying to make a difference. So that is just so important to stay connected to that, to remember that we are actually so many.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.